your microphone muted unless you are speaking, so that all speakers can start by stating their name. This will benefit everyone, especially those who are participating by phone. Working group members will be able to share your video. You may keep your video on or off. Members of the public in attendance may submit questions or comments at any time in writing using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Meeting staff will address them as time allows toward the end of the presentation and we begin our discussion portion. If you need technical assistance today, please contact Zoom's technical support at 888-799-9666 or email on the Mass.side side, Raisa Kuame at the listed email address on this slide. Next slide, please. As part of today's agenda, we will review expectations and ground rules for this working group, continue with introductions, project goals, Mass.'s process and schedule for the study. We'll outline next steps for the study, and then we'll have a discussion with you, the members of the working group. We'll end this meeting with a public comment period for any members of the public who may be joining us on the call today in accordance with the state open meeting law. Next slide, please. On this slide, please find our ground rules for working group participation and working group meetings. We request that you respectfully listen to the opinions of others in addition to your own, and so that we may ensure a constructive and productive discussion. We're asked that throughout the study process, you make a consistent effort to attend our working group meetings so that we can collect your input. We expect that there will be 3 meetings over the course of the study, in addition to 2 public meetings. If you're unable to attend, please feel free to send a representative on your behalf. All of these meetings will be recorded, and you are allowed to show video, as well as keep your video on or off during the presentation. We may mute you if this becomes distracting. All participants are asked to turn off their notifications on their phone, computer, and other devices so that full participation may be ensured. Next slide, please. We'll begin with some introductions of all members of the working group. Please state your name, pronouns, and affiliation with your organization or representative. Going through the list alphabetically, can we start with Raisa Kuame, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm Raisa Kwame. I am supporting Mass.OTP in this effort. I am part of Mass.OTP. I work as a regional planning coordinator, and I am the MPO liaison to the Martha's Vineyard region.
Thank you. Joe Zisman.
Hi, my name is Joe Zisman. My pronouns are he, him. I am the project manager with Cambridge Systematics Consult Support Project.
Seema Singh.
Hi, everyone. I'm Seema Singh. My pronouns are she, her, and I am an analyst on the project from the Cambridge Systematics side.
Anna Silariel Salcedo, excuse me. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself? We'll continue on with Andrea Coates.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I got a call in the middle of this.
That's okay. Can you introduce yourself with your name, pronouns, and affiliation?
Andrea Coates, she, and I'm the District 5 environmental engineer.
Thank you. Jay Grande,
Jay Grande, Town Administrator, Tisbury.
thank you.
If you want to go. And Kirk Mattel, DPW Director, is here as well.
Happy to have you here, Kirk.
Thank you.
Barbara LaChance,
Good afternoon, everybody. Barbara LaChance. I am the Mass DOT District 5 Planner.
Ben Robinson,
Hi, Ben Robinson, he, him, Chair, Pittsburgh Planning Board, Chair, Water Resources Committee.
Ethan Britland,
My video is on, but it's not showing me apparently. So hi, Ethan Britland. I'm with Mass DOT in the planning department. I work with Patrick and I'll also be providing support.
Gareth Saunders,
Thank you, Patrick. I'm Gareth Saunders from Legislative Affairs, and I'm also the Highway Liaison for the Cape and the Islands.
James Hool,
Hello, I'm James Hool, Director of the University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center, and I've been working on the island for a few years now with the town and others. Great to be here.
Hung Pham,
Hello, how are you? My name is Hung Pham, pronouns he, him. I am with Mass DOT. I am a Senior Program Manager for Resiliency and Roadway Reconstruction.
Jason Walters,
Hi, Jason Walters. I'm with MassDOT MassDOT D5 projects.
Joseph Lane,
Hi, Joe Lane, Mass DOT District 5 Utility Section.
Haley Moore,
Hi, Kaylee Moore, she, her. I'm the legislative liaison to Martha's Vineyard, and I work in Rep. Fernandez's office.
Michael Holcomb,
Hi, Michael Holcomb, he, him, District Director in the Office of Cape and Island State Senator Julian Sear.
Richard Bilski,
Richard Bilski, I'm the District 5 Acting Project Development Engineer.
and Sean Handy.
Hi, I'm Sean Handy. I'm the Mass DOT District 5 Projects Engineer and Review Supervisor.
Thank you, everyone. Next slide, please. So without further ado, I will turn it over to the lead consultant team, Cambridge Systematics, to review our end of the study.
Thank you, Patrick. So understanding that we are coming to this somewhat midstream, there has been a lot of work that's already been done at this location and in the surrounding area. But to go over some of the information that we have already collected as to what made this project necessary in Tisbury and in Vineyard Haven. As a reminder, the scope of this project is focused on the geometry of the roadways, their safety, their efficiency for all users, and their vulnerability to flooding through a couple of different sources. Next slide, please. Five Corners is a well-known location in Martha's Vineyard. Safety issues there are well documented. And in 2015, MassDOT completed a road safety audit, a formal review of existing conditions and potential enhancements at the intersection. Additional work in the area has included two further MassDOT projects. One was related to a multi-use path along Beach Road, and another that is ongoing related to drainage along State Road. Our project began last month and is intended to tie some of these efforts together going forward. Next slide, please. The study area for the project includes Five Corners and all of the legs that approach it. The broader study area includes the Vineyard Wind site and also the ferry terminal. We will work through this data in more detail, but in summary, this area is critical for the functioning of Martha's Vineyard. It's the point of entry and departure for large numbers of visitors, residents, and cargo. The data shows that safety is a concern all through the road system, with 20 injuries and a single death in the past 5 years, then that the entire area is prone to flooding today and will be increasingly vulnerable as seas rise later in the century. Next slide, please. The importance of Five Corners to travel in the Vineyard Haven community is illustrated through the variety of travel that passes through it. We showed a link to the live camera before. It was actually a few slides earlier while Patrick was speaking. And if you watch the camera for only a few minutes, or of course, if you are there and you go down and watch in person, you can see that there are buses and ambulances, people on bicycles and on foot, traffic to and from the ferry terminal, and travel for both business and personal purposes. Thanks to the presence of the ferry, this study area is a core entry point for freight and cargo to Martha's Vineyard as well. The current state of the roadway infrastructure and its operation is non-controlled and informal. One of the town studies that we reviewed said that it ran by politeness. That's a quote from them. And again, this is clear from a brief viewing of the camera feed, or if you travel through it regularly in person. Challenging sight lines mean that drivers often progress halfway through the intersection before stopping for a pedestrian in a crosswalk. They creep into the intersection from all angles and then look for permission or a gesture or a facial expression from another driver in order to pass. In other words, a lot of traffic moves through the intersection in ways that are dependent on glances, hand motions, and other informal forms of control. Next slide, please. On the vulnerability side, there are a couple of ways to consider vulnerability to flooding in the study area. The first comes from the coast. The range of sea level rise estimates for Vineyard Haven is somewhat wide. There are a number of different sources. The 1 to 4 feet and 1 to 6 feet that we give here come from a source that through a couple of levels of interpretation is from the Martha's Vineyard Commission. But generally speaking, they all fall in at least a foot of sea level rise as the century progresses. And on top of that baseline, storms are expected to increase in severity with heavier flooding. And you combine those together and you get the map on the right. The green and the red areas on the map are places where flooding is expected to be fairly routine in 2050. The yellow and the white outlined areas, and there's a little bit of white that you can see there, are the areas expected to be vulnerable in rarer instances of flooding. It says 100-year storm flooding, but there is the general assumption at this point that 100-year storms do not necessarily come only every 100 years. Note that Five Corners itself is in the green and red zone, so it would be expected to be regularly underwater by 2050, according to this particular analysis we're showing. The second angle on vulnerability is drainage and stormwater management. This is an area that MassDOT is already looking to address with the drainage project that focuses on State Road upstream of Five Corners. And one challenge for draining this area that came up in our review of that project is the only outfall for stormwater is currently located at the foot of the beach road extension. That's on the beach, and wave-borne debris can block that outlet. So there are some alternatives being considered, or that we may have to consider for how that can be addressed. In addition to MassDOT's project, the town of Tisbury is also considering various drainage solutions for Veterans Park. Next slide, please. So in response to these challenges, this project is going to move the ball forward by identifying conceptual alternatives for improving infrastructure in the study area. It's important to note this is not a construction project. While future efforts may build on our conceptual alternatives and design and build efforts, this project itself will not do so. Next slide, please. So our goal is to develop 3 conceptual plans for the study area with high-level cost estimates. While doing so, we will address current and potential future flooding. We will consider the presence of flows of people, vehicles, and cargo through the study area from the ferry. We will build on work done since 2015 around safety and multimodal operations at Five Corners and its approaches. And through all of it, we will engage local stakeholders through this working group and also through a pair of public meetings. Next slide, please. The first element of our work is complete streets, considering geometric and operational improvements to roadways in the study area. We have already reviewed prior work within the study area that's informed some of what you've heard this afternoon. We've also begun to analyze data on the crashes in the study area over the past 5 years. We'll seek data from many of you, the Steamship Authority, the town, the police, the state police, among others, to quantitatively understand how multimodal traffic flows through this area. We're planning also on conducting a site distance analysis at Five Corners to document visibility challenges on all of the approaches, and our conceptual alternatives will comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Next slide, please. Previous slide, please. The second element of our work is resiliency. planning for impacts of sea level rise, coastal flooding, and drainage. We've already reviewed prior work on coastal vulnerability, as we've seen in the prior slides. The next step is to do more of our own detailed analysis of exposure and vulnerability in the area. With that in hand, we'll consider possible adaptations to build into our conceptual design alternatives. These will begin with drainage and stormwater, following on MassDOT's ongoing work, but may also include hardening and raising of assets. And finally, we'll develop design criteria and standards for the area using the Massachusetts Climate Resilience Design Standards tool to be applied in our conceptual design alternatives. 2 slides ahead, please. All of these pieces come together in our concept plans, and we're going to put together 3 of them. We'll consider safety, operational resiliency improvements with a range of different intensities. These may include changes to geometry or layout of roadways in addition to signing, placemaking, wayfinding. They could also include operational changes like one-way streets, turning, or parking restrictions. And as we do that, we'll be guided by a need to minimize impacts to neighboring properties. While we won't be developing detailed design or construction documents, we will be estimating something of a high-level cost for each alternative. Next slide, please. Following this meeting, we'll continue our ongoing quantitative analysis of safety operations and vulnerability. We will perform on-site site distance analysis in the coming weeks. You'll hear from us again likely in early October to review some of those results. We will also conduct a public meeting in November, and further touch points will come in winter and early 2024. And I will now hand back to Patrick to start the discussion.
Thank you, Joe. Next slide, please. So we have arrived at the main point of this working group meeting today. We want to hear from you, the working group members, the local stakeholders. After this discussion, we will have a public comment period. The point of this discussion right now is to hear from local stakeholders and officials in the area. So we will hold a discussion where all of you can give your input on your perception of the area right now, any areas that you might want us to explore in terms of themes for the study, and any other questions or comments that you might have. Next slide, please. So we do have some discussion prompts here if you need any ideas about what you might like to contribute today. In order to conduct this discussion in an orderly manner, we ask that you please use the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen under reactions, and then we can call on you to unmute. If you're calling in on the phone today, please dial *9 and we'll call out the last 4 digits of your phone number and unmute your audio. When you make a comment or ask a question, please state your name and only share 1 question at a time so that everyone has a chance to participate as we go along. So if anyone has any questions, comments, please use the raise hand. Ben Robinson.
Patrick, you mentioned in your presentation that there was 1 outfall pipe at Beach Street Extension. The town has drainage coming down from Main Street and Union Street that has an outfall pipe at the extension of Union Street across the steamship operations. Is that, do you note that, or is that something you weren't aware of? And I mentioned that because that, depending on geography and topography and elevation, that may be an alternative outfall pipe that could be used for this area.
Joe, are you able to speak to any materials that we may have received at this point, which include details about the existing drainage systems?
I don't know if you have the drainage system maps that the town has, and if you don't, we can get you those.
That'd be appreciated.
Patrick, I think Hung may want to respond to that.
Go ahead, Hung.
Hi, my name is Hung. Thanks, Ben, on that. Yeah, when we assessed the outfall, we were looking at the topo and where the water is flowing within Main Street and the Beach Street. I believe since the intersection at that area is so low and what have you, I would be interested in where the elevation of those drain pipe on Water Street would be. So
Yeah,
that
I don't think you would be able to pick it up at Water Street. You'd have to pick up that system higher up the hill, either at Main Street or potentially Cromwell maybe. But once we give you those maps and you can see where those pipes are, you'll have a better sense of at what point you'll be able to pick it up.
Yeah, definitely. Let's take this discussion offline, and once we receive the material, definitely take a closer look at that.
Thank you for that contribution. Richard Bilski?
Yeah, along those lines, I know as part of the study, we wanted to look at potential alternative outfall sites also that maybe don't have such a challenging issues with storm flowage and siltation. Because I know the current outfall location presents many challenges with siltation, but also that with the harbor itself and the function of the harbor. So we want to keep that open to alternative locations, and those should be explored further. And then I have two other points too, but I can come back to those later if you would desire.
At this moment, I don't see anybody else with a raised hand, so you can go ahead.
Okay, I know we were also looking at the scope. I think you were showing 100-year storm.
Yes.
I think we were also looking at the possibility of 50 and maybe 20, just to look at different cost options.
As part of our scope, this study will result in some higher level cost estimations for the alternatives. So it should end up producing a range of different options. I did make a note of the 20 and 50-year horizons, which Cambridge Systematics may be able to look into as they do their more detailed flood vulnerability analysis.
Right, and we can adjust that, but I know the concept was we're going to look at different ones and see what the cost effectiveness of each type of storm event we were going to plan for. And then the other things too is they need to do an analysis of the existing utilities, because of all the projects we worked in this area, we've run the issues where the existing utilities need to be reconstructed as part of the projects. And that's going to be typically a non-participating cost that the community is going to have to participate in and partner with us. So that's something that should be taken into account too. Thank you.
Joe, do you have any thoughts about any of that? I know it's a lot to chew on as we wade further into alternatives development and existing conditions.
Sure. So to the first point, I think in terms of time horizon, so there's a difference between storm frequency, which is what we mean when we say 100-year storm, and time horizon, which is 20, 50, 70 years in the future. So I think generally speaking, the time horizons you're talking about are 2050, 2070, 2100. And at each of those points, there may be there are flood heights associated with a 20-year storm, a 50-year storm, a 100-year storm. So there's a couple of different dimensions of that, and we'll be looking at a range of them. I can't say for certain exactly what that will be yet, but certainly we've reviewed a wide range of them. The other point on utilities, I think some of that is going to have to be left for the future design project. Specifics about where utilities are located and where they would have to be moved, while that's incredibly important, is not entirely commensurate with a conceptual design. So I think some of that, while we certainly would appreciate if there's information that's out there on that folks could share on where the utilities are right now, just to make sure that we're not going to be proposing anything in conceptual alternatives that is non-constructible or not constructible within a reasonable budget. That is certainly something we don't want to be proposing unbuildable things. Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I would say though, unless otherwise, I think the assumption is going to be that we would have to relocate all subsurface utilities from our past experience with adjacent projects. So we do want to capture that in the project cost.
Got it.
Thank you both. Is there anyone else with questions, comments, concerns? Anything that they would like to add? Please raise your hand. Ben Robinson.
Yeah, just circling back to the storm, the 100-year storm, the frequency of 100-year storms is increased. Is the state updating any metrics in which communities or you in this project would be reviewing that based against increased storm events?
Hung or someone from the highway division may be able to speak to this more specifically.
Yeah, in terms of the precipitation data that we rely on is strictly through NOAA 14 that we use. So I know the DEP has promulgating or proposing a plus factor within that. Each community is doing. For example, Cambridge is adding a safety factor to that. With the state and what our engineers are calculating to is just with NOAA 14. So that's the precipitation, that data that we are using. And in terms of the frequency, we don't usually calculate that with any of our drainage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just more wondering if there's an update or how recent the information is.
Yeah, that update is we're relying on NOAA to update that. I know that Cornell University does have a precipitation data, and there have been some discussion on that, but right now it's just what NOAA's putting out.
For this study, Cambridge Systematics is using a variety of sources. I can also say that MassDOT is currently working on a flood risk assessment. That's a dynamic project, and from my understanding, those results are not yet available, but they will eventually be out there and ready to go. But right now we're drawing on the resources that we have publicly available. And then we do also think more about sea level rise than frequency of these events to plan for the more intense, higher level water situations, if that makes sense.
If an updated data set becomes available during this process, would we have access to it, or would we be stuck using the older data set?
Oh, for sure, you have access to that. I don't see why you would. No, the answer would be.
Would this project be able to reflect an updated data set? Is the question.
Now I have to ask. You have to define a data set for me, because in my mind, when we talk about precipitation and frequency, it is strictly on the data is available for NOAA, and
yeah, if the NOAA data set changes during this project,
it would depend on where we are in the phase of the study, like how far we've progressed into alternatives development and what we're looking at. And for that reason, that's why we're drawing on a variety of data sources to get a more holistic picture of everything that might be going on.
James, the stormwater UNH section, have you guys been using a different set of data in terms of calculating stormwater frequency and intensity?
No, it's NRCC or Atlas 14. There have been discussions about that plus factor that you talked about here. It's 15%. I think Massachusetts, they've been talking about possibly 10% plus 10, no 14 plus 10. But it's, I think I was raising my hand because I think I'm here mainly because we had developed a design for outfall rehabilitation at the end of Beach Street Extension. Obviously, when you're considering something like that in an existing condition that I guess not only is non-conforming, but may never be conforming to whatever standard you choose, right? I don't know that we can design that outfall currently conforming to any of the latest regulations. I think it was already mentioned that it's pretty much, if you go there now, the water is a couple of inches below the surface in the existing condition, and the outfall has hydraulic restraints based on low elevation pipes that are inundated by tide and sand from moving tide. So we had forwarded this concept design that, again, we didn't use any standards because if we were to size the pipe or size infrastructure for the current standards, in whatever you want to use, Atlas 14, Atlas 15, Atlas 14 plus 15, it's it would be almost impossible to design and fit in that location. So I guess the one thing I guess that I'm stressing is in many instances we have an existing condition that really is untenable and is a huge health and safety condition for all the reasons that were stated up front, right? This is a major corridor. And also a major evacuation. So it's where things come in, and it's where also people get evacuated. And the Five Corners in the existing state as it is now, right, needs some type of improvement. So I guess the challenge is, how do you thread the needle between a design that improves the existing condition while maybe not checking all the boxes, and then at least alleviate some of the existing threats and hazards. And that's sort of what we put forward. And I guess my reading of some of the permit constraints is because it's an existing outfall in disrepair, that as long as you're not interfering with the navigable channel, that it's a permit by notification. So because it's a dilapidated existing structure, the permitting, it would be exempt, or at least partially exempt, from a lot of the more rigorous permitting out there. So I think that's all I want to say.
Thank you, James. Ben, did you want to say anything further on that?
No, thanks, I'm good.
Okay. So we've talked about resilience. This study is also largely focused on the roadway system, the freight that's moving in and out of the ferry terminal there. This being a major pathway across part of the northern coast of Martha's Vineyard. Safety considerations, as this is an unsignalized intersection. Does anyone have impressions, questions, comments, concerns about the way that this roadway system area in Vineyard Haven operates? Was someone, okay, Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, another question actually backing up just to resiliency.
Okay.
During those different storm events, it'd be very helpful to study identified impacts to adjacent properties also, because that's going to be critical, is how much are the adjacent abutters being impacted by whatever we do for mitigation.
Joe can confirm this, but I believe as part of our alternatives analysis, looking at how these conceptual plans might address the goals and objectives for this study, I believe that alternatives analysis will consider right-of-way impacts.
Yes.
Thank you, Joe.
Great, thank you.
Jay?
Yeah, I think everyone knows the intersection basically fails when a steamship authority vessel pulls in. There's a similar to a downtown train location, you know, where the road crosses. It takes a couple of cycles, but here there's no signal. It takes some time for it to clear out. Further, whatever capacity increases you manage to gain in future improvements, it really, the concern would be it takes it to an intersection on State Road at Vineyard Haven, Edgartown Road, where it would fail and has capacity limitations as well. I don't think there's any land available to really provide additional stacking or anything like that, but coordination in some manner with the Edgartown Vineyard Haven State Road intersection, and potentially some ability in that immediate area of Five Corners to create some dedicated through traffic inbound and outbound, whether it's through additional right-of-way. I think you might want to just look beyond the immediate intersection, including Lagoon Pond Road, as well as that other intersection at Edgartown, Vineyard Haven, and State Road in terms of the overall movement of traffic. I'm sure you're thinking of that, but I just want to put it on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you to clarify, please? You mentioned capacity increases and the effect that those might have on State Road, Edgartown. Are you concerned that if there are capacity increases in the Five Corners area, that might lead to worse backups downstream, so to speak?
Yes, you said it exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
that's it. Yeah.
Does anyone else have comments, questions, concerns about the roadways? A focus of this project is to really start looking at the area, you know, in addition to vehicular operations, you know, how to make accommodations and take a complete streets approach to, you know, allowing multimodal operations in this area, also considering pedestrians, bicyclists, other vulnerable road users who could benefit from what we call a complete streets approach, which is looking at everything holistically beyond these typical capacity considerations. Richard?
Now, would we consider maybe a preliminary like ice report on this intersection?
We can look at the criteria set by FHWA for ice reports. As it stands right now, this project is sort of preliminary for a preliminary ice report, and you know that could be involved later in the project development process if any of our conceptual alternatives move forward after this.
Right, I just think it might be beneficial if it was kind of tied together, because if whatever recommendation was made, it would still have to go through this process, and it would be kind of a waste if it didn't take that into account, because the ice process would nullify the concept.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, if anyone is calling in on the phone today, that you can dial *9 in order to raise your hand, and then we can unmute you and give you the go-ahead to ask a question. Then we're just looking for any input, perceptions that you as stakeholders in the area have gleaned in your years of experience. Also, if you have any thoughts of data or other background information that you could send over to us, provide to help us put together our existing conditions to better understand the area. If there are no further comments, questions from members of the working group, we'll move forward to the public comment period. So next slide, please. As this is a meeting open to the public in accordance with the state open meeting law, members of the public were free to attend today. And if there are any members of the public on the call today, please feel free to raise your hand if you would like to make a comment or ask a question, and we will call on you. Seeing no hands raised, we'll move forward to the next slide. I want to thank you personally for all of your questions and comments and attendance at the meeting today. We really appreciate your attendance and look forward to working with you in the future. At some point in the fall, we'll reach out with an invitation to the next working group meeting, where we hope to present our existing conditions and have further discussion with you, the members of the working group. Again, thank you for attending today, and have a good rest of your day.